It is good to be with you this morning. I want to make sure my presentation's working here. It's highly reliant on the clicker. Okay, it's a little bit, it's okay, we're not working. That's okay though. So if you flip to the next slide, if you will. I want to tell you about this guy. This is Yakuba Sawadogo. Yakuba is an African farmer in the Burkina Faso region, just south of Ghana. Farming these lands is all that he knows. But in the 1970s, his land came under attack. A drought, a vicious drought raced through, threatening Yakuba's livelihood, his land, his crops. The government raced in. The government tried to do what they could to save the land, but nothing worked. Yakuba took it into his own hands. What Yakuba did was he took this axe-type contraption, and he started to dig troughs around his plants, his crops, his trees, in hopes that when the rain did fall, it would collect, and it would nourish his crops and his trees. It worked. What Yakuba then did is he realized that as the drought prolonged, the land became drier and crisper, and the water wasn't penetrating to the roots. So he took the same axe-like contraption, and he made multiple little holes around each of his crops and his trees, so that when the rain did come, it would seep right to the roots. It worked even better. What Yakuba then did is he filled those holes with the manure from his livestock, in hopes that when the rain did fall, it would seep through the holes. It would carry the nutrients from the manure and nourish his trees and his crops. It worked even better. Without knowing it, Yakuba not only had just saved his land, he had saved a vast region of Africa. Because what happened is farmers in neighboring regions heard of what he did, and they replicated what he did. They copied him. And before you knew it, not only Yakuba's land was saved, but farmers in all of the preceding and surrounding areas was saved as well. But what's most remarkable about this story is that Yakuba doesn't read, doesn't know how to write. He's never been to a creativity class before where you learn how to brainstorm. He's never been to those half-day seminars where you learn what color you are. And if you're an ENTF or an INTJ or a WTF, I don't even know what happens at those things sometimes. Yakuba had been to none of that. Yakuba just followed his intuition. The same intuition within all of us as naturally born creators. That's what today is all about. The reason I brought you to Africa is because I believe creativity is found everywhere you look. It's found on the plains of Africa, just as it's found in the cubicle farms of corporate Canada, just as it's found in the classrooms of schools all around this nation, just as it's found in big businesses, startups, small businesses, medium-sized businesses. Creativity is found everywhere we look. But we've done damage in the Western world to the definition of creativity. Creativity has moved from being human creativity, something innate to all of us, to becoming artistry, reserved for a unique, creative class of individuals who are artists and actors and creative directors and agency people. They're the only ones that can be creative. You have it all wrong. And today is I want to talk to us about how do we bring more of the Yakuba style of creativity to the Western world. We forget sometimes that we are all born innately creative, and it should not be held to those who are just artists. My name is Greg, and I'm an unsuspecting creative. I work on the client side. I don't work at an agency. I can't draw. I don't know how to play an instrument. But I consider myself to be creative. And I fundamentally believe that all of us are born creative as well. We forget that we're born creative. Studies have been done that ask people in the westernized world, are you creative? Any guesses on the number of people that say they are? 25%, a quarter of us, consider ourselves to be creative. Do you see a problem brewing here where only a quarter of us in this room, in this nation, in this continent can harness all that being creative has to offer? There's something very, very wrong about this picture, and what I'm hoping we can do today is to understand what we can do about it. The last year of my life has been spent understanding why so few of us identify as creative, and what can we do to identify as being creative. It's not just about a label. It's about harnessing all that brings. It's about knowing what your dominant form of creativity is, so you can maximize it, so you can leverage it, so you can become better for it, and so that you can build a better life for it as well. I think we have to start with the definition of creativity to understand where it's all gone wrong. When I go around talking to folks in smaller settings, I ask a simple question. So I want you to think about it here and now as well. What do you think immediately precedes an act of creativity? What do you think immediately precedes an act of creativity? In your brain, in the environment, what immediately precedes an act of creativity? What comes before an act of creativity? Time and time again, I hear one consistent answer, and that is inspiration. You have to be inspired to be creative. It's as if you get a text message from the creative gods, and they're telling you that, planting this idea in your head, and you turn it into a work of art, and that work of art gets noticed, and then that notice turns into a followership, and then before you know it, you're a famous artist. Inspiration precedes creativity. That's what media will have us believe. That's what folklore, what society will have us believe. But I want to suggest to you and bring to you a different way to look at creativity today. Instead of inspiration preceding creativity, I think that possibility precedes creativity. If we go to the next slide, if we will, possibility precedes creativity. It's the possibility to be better, the possibility to be more efficient, the possibility to sign one more deal, the possibility to build your business that much bigger, the possibility to find a new venue after your venue falls through the day before your event, the possibility to do so much more, the possibility to save your land threatened by a drought. Those are creative people who angle themselves towards possibility, who see it and greet it with a sense of wonder, what could become. You see what we just did? We took creativity as being just driven by inspiration, which I don't know about you, but on a daily basis, I don't feel creatively inspired. I can't tell you the last time I felt creatively inspired. I love my job. I do a good job at what I do, but like this inspiration thing, it's a little bit out of touch. But when we change the yardstick by which we measure creativity by, from inspiration to possibility, we're greeted with multiple moments of possibility in one day. Just today, coming in this room, you probably had multiple moments of possibility. The creative people in this room came into a conference like this today and said, there's a possibility to grow my network by hundreds of people today. And those creative people are in the seats today sitting next to someone that they don't know. We'll talk about this later, but I believe that connectors are a valuable type of creator. They create value through relationships. They're creators. When's the last time you thought of a connector as a creator? But that's fundamentally what we're here to do, is to redefine what we look like, how we look at creativity. My fear is that if we keep going down this road where the benchmark is so high to be creative, you have to be an artist, we're going to continue to isolate individuals and stem their potential because they can't relate. I'm going to make a bold prediction here. I think that if you consider yourself uncreative today, you're facing a risk of extinction down the road. And I'm going to back this up. Big, bold statement. I understand. I will back it up. It's never been more important than now to be creative. Fundamentally, it has never been more important than now. If we go to the next slide, I'm going to take us on a bit of a history lesson This is supposed to build, so you can see my entire next 5 minutes on a slide when it was supposed to build, so bear with me on this one. I'm going to take on a bit of history in terms of the last 200 years. What's mattered to humans and what's propelled us to succeed in whatever we were doing. You'll understand what I mean as we go through. Let's start a couple hundred years ago. In the industrial economy. This was the agricultural age. This was where labor best predicted your success rate as a human. It was your ability to lay more rail. It was your ability to farm more hectares of land. It was your ability to use your brawn and your strength to create results. That's what mattered back then. And humans were all excited. Humans were like, awesome, we're this great species that has the brawn and the strength to basically command the world. And if I can lift stuff and I can farm the land, I'll be successful. And we got really overconfident with that. And then machines came along and could do what we were doing, but better, cheaper, more efficiently, faster. And humans were like, shit. Is that the first word, S word in a church? I apologize. Completely, that was unintentional.
Here comes the lightning.
Yeah. Humans are like, oh my goodness, so what are we about now? If we're being threatened on the front of labor, which we've been known about for years, and this is how we build our future, and this is what makes us successful, what's next? What's going to happen here? And humans had an identity crisis. And then humans were like, what's gonna come of us? And then we slowly moved into the post-industrial age. And humans said, well, we have this thing on top of our spine called a head and a brain, so maybe the brain is something that we can use for our advantage. And this was an age where it was about how much we could calculate, how much we could know, what we could process and write and consume. This is when IQ was developed, the intellectual quotient. One of the very first uses of IQ was by the US military. It was used to en masse segment individuals, applicants, to be a part of the US military. The US military said, very intelligently, I suppose, in hindsight not so much, that if you have a higher IQ, you're going to fight better on the front lines. And we all can assume where that went. But the fact is, IQ was everything. And intelligence was everything. And the most successful humans had the higher IQ. And then, because you can already see, computers came along. Computers could store more information, process more information, recall more information, do more calculations per second than a human could. And humans were like, again, back where we're at, back where we started. What are we about as a human race? What's going on here? They had identity crisis. And then, with time, we entered the knowledge economy. So if the post-industrial age was kind of data, what you knew, the knowledge economy was what you know in terms of the insights, the background, the information age, going from data to information. Data in the post-industrial age, information in the knowledge economies. And what became core to our success as humans in the knowledge economy was our ability to understand emotions. And thus the EQ came along, the emotional quotient, invented, kind of coined, call it 50, 60 years ago. The EQ was, in my opinion, an answer to the question, why when you look around the corporate boardrooms, why is the CEO not the smartest person in the room? Completely disregarding EQ. In fact, studies now show that IQ now only constitutes 4 to 7% of success. Studies have shown that. So we had to enter into a new era where the EQ was much more important. And it's your ability to understand emotion, to show emotion, that's what constitutes success in the knowledge economy. And you're a bunch of technology experts. You know where I'm going with this. AI and technology advances, machine learning, and others are now on the verge of being able to understand and show emotion. So humans are, again, what are we all about? What are we on this planet to do? What is unique to our species? Because now even our ability to display and to understand and comprehend emotion is no longer relevant. So I think we're entering an economy that's going to move from the information age to the artificial intelligence age. But it's going to be moved from being a knowledge economy to being the creative economy. Because it's what we have, basically what we have left as a species, in terms of what we bring to this world, and it is our ingenuity. If you go to the next slide, that's the creative economy. And it's the CQ. I'm not going to get into the CQ today. I could give a whole speech on what makes up a strong creative quotient. But that is what is going to drive success in today's day and age. I fundamentally believe that. It's not just me saying that. The United Nations compiled some of the greatest labor minds and economists, and they asked them, what's the unemployment rate going to be like in, 50 years? So these people took it away, and they pushed up their glasses, and they kind of queued a number of numbers into the calculator, and they said, we're going to reach an unemployment rate of between 25 to 50% in 50 years. It's like 4 to 6% right now. And people are like, oh my God, yeah, that's an issue. And so people ask why? Like, why is that? And the United Nations experts said it's because of AI. And it's the ability for machines and robotics and machine learning and that whole field of technologically advanced processes to replace what we do as humans. Now is our time to be creative. We have to be creative now. It is incumbent upon us, and it is more important now than ever. Anyone heard of Dan Pink, author of some really great books? A Whole New Mind should be on your hit list in the next couple months. One of the greatest books I think ever written. In this book, Daniel Pink calls it the age of conceptualism. It's the age that we're in now. I call it the creative economy. He calls it the age of conceptualism. This is the day and age where it's not your ability to analyze, it's your ability to synthesize. He talks about how humans are going to move from being left hemisphere dominant to being right hemisphere dominant. Left is logical, right is creative. It's a high touch, high concept economy. It's not just me. A lot of thinking has gone into this. If you're a sales manager at a car dealership, you've never had better product than you do now. You have the best cars on the market. And not just that, you have the best understanding of your customers than you've ever had. I'll give HubSpot a plug here. If you use HubSpot, you know more about your customers than they want you to know. And that is the power of the place that we're in. But it's your job as a car salesman and car sales manager to use all that information, all those advances to sign a deal. That takes creativity. Robots will never be able to create a deal, be able to persuade a human to sign on the dotted line. This is what you bring to the table, and it's so important to exercise that now more than ever. If we go to the next slide. Truly back up. Sorry. We'll get there in a second. So that's why it's more important than ever to be creative. But I understand that a lot of us in this room, or a lot of people that we know, I know 3/4 of us in the Western hemisphere of this earth, don't consider ourselves to be creative. So before I talk about how to define yourself as a creator, I think it's important that we defend that we're a creator and that we're creative. So two areas I want to talk to you about in terms of defending this innate creativity that is within all of us. First one is cortex. Second one is childhood. Let's talk about cortex first. A study was done. I want to talk to you about. A study was done at a big name university, rhymes with Schmarvard, might have heard of it. What they did was they brought in jazz musicians. They brought them into a room, and they said, we want to understand how the brain works when you're creative. Not just them, but we'll be able to replicate the findings to humanity broadly. So they brought these jazz musicians in, they came in carrying their tubas and their harps or whatever they play, and they came into the room, and what the researchers did was put this thing on their head called an fMRI machine, which is like an MRI machine, but with an F on the front of it. Just in case you didn't know what that was. Actually, fMRI stands for real-time tracking, as opposed to snapshot tracking that an MRI does. fMRI is real-time tracking of the movement, of the activations of the different regions of your brain. Basically, how your blood's flowing in different regions of the brain. They want to know what can that tell us about how humans are creative. The study reveals some amazing things. If you go to the next slide, this is what it revealed. There you go. That's it. I'll tell you what it means. It's actually, what's most amazing about it is that it's not what the brain does, it's what the brain doesn't do when we're creative. That is so unbelievable. If you look at that with the arrows pointing, that region of the brain, it's actually the prefrontal cortex, those two things at the top of the eye socket. So it's basically the frontal part of your cortex. It didn't activate. Your prefrontal cortex did not activate. So researchers were puzzled. They're like, this is a critical area of the brain, that the cortex is responsible for a lot of things. Why didn't it activate when these musicians were being creative? So they pondered on it. They didn't have an answer. So they brought in psychologists and neurologists and more people, and they came to an interesting finding, which is your cortex, your prefrontal cortex, is in charge of self-regulation and self-identity. So what the brain does when you're creative is it turns off your regulatory department. It makes it easier for you to be innovative. It makes it easier for you to think differently. There's less holding you back. The brain wants you to be creative. The brain is designed for you to be creative. The brain is most creative when you're least connected to rational thought. Think of this. Christmas time comes around, my favorite time of year. But there's one thing I hate about Christmas, is Christmas cards. Because we get Christmas cards, and it's for our family, and when I lived at home, I would get them last, and everyone else has written these lovely comments on the Christmas card. We've all been there. We get it, and we're like, it's for Aunt Mildred. I love Aunt Mildred. I'm going to write her the nicest, most innovative, most creative message I've ever sent to her. She's going to remember it for the rest of her life. This is going to be the message that just gets right to her soul. You get it, you look at the card, and you can't think of anything. Forced creativity doesn't work. You end up just writing what Uncle Bert wrote on top of the note. You just end up copying what someone else does. If you can reach a point where you've freed yourself up, the brain is going to help you get there to be creative. This is not just jazz musicians' brains. This is all of our brains. It's wired to help us to create. Paradoxically, though, as good as the brain is at helping us to create, it's even better at telling us that we're not creative. It's this weird paradox that our brain does. Second to creativity, this, I think, one of the greatest features of our brain is its ability to be aware of our thoughts. We're the only species on this planet that is aware of our thoughts. How many of you right now are thinking, I'm aware of the fact that I'm thinking about what he just said? There's no llamas or sperm whales or dogs or cats out there that are thinking like that. They can't. This is why mindfulness meditation has become such a profound movement in our generation, is because people are realizing, wow, I can actually be aware of my thoughts. I don't have to trust my thoughts. I don't have to believe my thoughts. But in this ability to be aware of our thoughts, we create space for something that is the creativity killer. We create room for judgment. I swear to God, this world would be 800 years progressed if we didn't judge our thoughts. Because what happens is we get these creative ideas, they stay within us, they don't come out, we don't execute on them because we judge them. As humans, we're taught to overlearn from negative experiences and underlearn from positive ones. Overlearn from negative experiences, underlearn from positive ones. How many times as kids would you come home, you'd have your report card, and you come up to your dad and be like, I got a B+. And he looks at it and he admires it, and he said, why not? Why isn't it an A? Story of my life. I'm still in therapy for it. It's horrible. We're taught to overlearn from negative experiences and underlearn from positive ones. That's why we judge our thoughts. Our brain is so good at telling us that we're not creative. But you have to get that under control. I think mindfulness is one of the greatest ways to do that. You don't have to believe the thoughts that you think. So please take some time to do some meditation after today. Pablo Picasso said, actually, I'm going to save that for later. Going back to Yakuba. When Yakuba was digging holes in the dirt with an axe, people around him called him crazy, called him mad. If you go to the next slide, next one. There we go. If you were wondering what the Prime Minister of Burkina Faso looks like in Africa, that's him right there. This is a quote from the Prime Minister of Burkina Faso. He said, at the beginning, people thought Yakuba to be a mad man. External voices were condescending. External voices told Yakuba he was doing the wrong thing. But thank God, Yakuba's inner voice was telling him that he was doing the right thing. It's about getting control about the external and inner voices and making sure your inner voice is strong. I hope I'm helping you defend that we're innately creative and how to become more creative. Second thing is childhood. Sigmund Freud would tell you that every problem starts in childhood. Everything we're dealing with today starts in childhood. The thing about creativity is unique. As children, we are never more creative than we are in childhood. But childhood is also where we learn to be least creative. It's this weird, paradoxical dynamic that plays out in all of our lives. On July 3rd, 1999, it was a tragic day in the nation. There was a family that was mourning. There was a little girl that was crying, mourning the loss of an illustrious life that was lived. It was the day that the hamster of my 8-year-old sister passed away. Caramel, Fudgy Pudgy, Oopsie Daisy, Murray. It was a tragic day in the nation. So to pay my respects, I brought the family together. I lined them up in the backyard. I pulled up this rusty, broken barbecue, and I laid a speech down, and I memorialized Caramel, Fudgy Pudgy, Oopsie Daisy, Murray. I wrote a speech about Caramel. I won't say it again. To memorialize. The family was together. My sister was bawling her eyes out. My mom was comforting her. My dad was holding back laughter. It was quite the scene. But I was a 10-year-old kid writing a speech about a hamster. And to add on one layer, for the first decade of my life, I was heard, but I wasn't understood. I had a horrible speech impediment, a stutter, I couldn't pronunciate, all those things. To add that layer on top of it, I was a kid who should not have dreamt of giving a memorial service. But we as children are creative. We don't get held back by things that should hold us back. I saw myself giving a speech about a hamster, but it's paralleled itself into my life in terms of now speaking is where I get my greatest joy from. Science shows that adults who are happiest are doing something that's closely related to what they loved doing between the ages of 9 to 11. I was giving speeches for hamsters. What were you doing? Think about that time in your life. It yields so many interesting insights. Picasso says, all children are born creative. The challenge is remaining one as you grow up. Picasso also said, the greatest artist of all time, said that he spent his entire adult life trying to be as creative as he was in his childhood. Harness that creativity that we're all born with. Think back to the times when you were highly creative as a kid, playing with G.I. Joes, playing with Lego, whatever it was. We are born creative. If you don't, looking back to your childhood is all the proof that you need of that. I started today off by saying that artists are one type of creator. There are others. There are four others, at least four others that I can think of. And I want to tell you a bit about them now. Now, before I go through them, most people can see a dominant one that they're like, oh, that's me. But there'll be fringe players as well. There'll be a few that you're like, oh yeah, I'm kind of like that. But look for the one that you're dominant in. Do some self-analysis here on the spot. Think of what your creativity type is today. Go to the next slide, please. First type are artists. And again, you can see everything. You can see in the next 10 minutes up on the screen, so I have no need to be here. The first type is artist. Artists are about expression. They create art as a matter of expression. Artists live in this world differently. Artists soak in emotion around them. They soak in conversations. They soak in people. They soak in reality. And they have so many emotions inside of them. They have to express that. And for them, it's a work of art. They create to express. Artists create to express. Artists move society forward. They move culture forward. That's what artists do. The next type are designers. Don't just think logo designers. Think bigger picture. These are designers of ideas. These are designers of thinking. They're about function. They're about how do I make things as efficient as possible? How do I make sense of this world? Designers are a true type of creator because they bring an eye of immense understanding and simplicity to matters. Just as artists move culture forward, designers move society forward. They create simplicity. Are you a designer? Connectors. We talked about this one quickly. Connectors are about being in service to others. They're about creating value through relationships. They're not about how many people I can add to LinkedIn. It's about how do I create value in your life as an individual. They create value through relationships. Creators are truly, their currency is relationships. I used to work at a startup. I was an early stage employee of a startup, and my CEO was a connector. He would walk into a room like this, and he would become alive. He would think of the tremendous connections that he could make. He could think of the value he could add and the value you could add to him. He would think of, oh, he knows him because he knows him, and then I can bring these two together, and then that's going to spread that idea. That's how he thought. He is a connector and a valued type of creator. So just like artists move culture forward, designers move society forward, connectors move people forward. That's their strength. Next type is developer. These people are about curiosity. That's their trigger. They're going out there. They're trying to find out as much as they can. They're creating ideas that will solve big issues that face the world. They're creating ways of thinking. For them, they build things like cases. I think lawyers are a very creative type of individuals. For example, I have a friend who's in insurance law, which is the most boring type of law. I'm sorry if you work in insurance law. It is just monotonous. But I asked him one day, John, do you consider yourself creative? He's like, yeah, highly creative. I build cases. I create cases, legal cases for a living. That's what I do. They're a value type of creator when you are a developer and you build things. So here we go. So just like artists move culture forward, designers move society forward, connectors move people forward, developers move ideas forward. They develop ideas. And we all know ideas can be incredibly powerful. Lastly, are craftsmen. These folks are all about immersion into a medium or a practice. These people soak it all in, and what they do is they create meaning from that medium. Good carpenters are not about creating ornate bookcases. Carpenters are about showcasing the wood. the grain in the wood, the aesthetic of the wood, the quality of the wood. They immerse themselves in the wood. They are true craftsmen. Just like journalists, I see a lot of craftsmen and journalists. You wouldn't think journalists are creators, but they are. Journalists immerse themselves in the craft, and they bring meaning through the craft of journalism, and they protect the craft of journalism. They're creators as well. Which one are you? Which one is you? Think about it. I hope today has acted as a bit of a jolt for you to think about your own creativity. If just one of you leaves this room today thinking, maybe I am creative, then I've succeeded. And I thank you for this opportunity to talk to you today. A lot of people wonder if the story of Yakuba is real. A few years ago, National Geographic wrote a cover story called The Man Who Stopped the Desert. It was about Yakuba. People who wonder, can an act of digging in dry dirt be an act of creativity? It's entirely an act of creativity. To showcase it, there's a term now called zai. Zai has become this term of digging holes in the ground, filling them with manure so that when the rain falls, it nourishes your plants. It's used as first line of defense for millions of African farmers when they face a drought. It's a very creative thing. When Yakuba was asked in this article about his journey, he said, I just have enough courage to hope. And I would say, Yakuba, that's not all. You had enough courage to create. Thank you.